Okay, hello. We wanted to get a little bit of the family history from grandmommy now, or my mom. I'm not sure what I should call you on the video here.
You can call me anything you want to.
Okay.
I'll fit all those categories. I'm going to start briefly with my mother's house and background in Edenton, North Carolina, which was on the near the Outer Banks, and that's where she grew up. And it was a very old house that my family and I love to go to visit because it was originally built in 1752, and it was a beautiful home and of that era, and it had a lot of land around it, and there were farmers, and so we loved to go to that house because it was very unique, and it had lots of rooms in it. And at Christmas time and Thanksgiving, when we would go about every other year, we would have huge tables full of food all over the house, in the living room, in the bedrooms, in the dining room, and everything. And my grandmother and people that were helping her would have this enormous feast of food, and it was so much fun. I had lots of cousins there, and that
Oh,
was
cool.
a lot of fun too. And that house was down a long lane. They didn't call it a road, they called it a lane. And it was planted with pecan trees on both sides, big ones. And they what they call whitewash those pecan trees in the summertime to make them look clean and fresh with white paint. And that was
Hmm.
kind of unusual too. And at the end of that road, when you cross the main road, there used to be a schoolhouse where my mother's aunt Patty taught school. And I remember my mother saying that she loved to be standing in the yard. She was too young to go to school, and she would see people out playing in the yard, and she would say to her mom, "I want to go and play where those little children in their red sweaters are playing." But of course, she couldn't go yet. But that house was a lot of fun, and it was old, and it had been in our family for a lot of generations and just passed down from son to daughter to whatever. And I love my grandmother Winburn. My grandfather Winburn died when I was about 4, so I don't have much recollection of him. But my
Hmm.
grandmother Winburn lived until after Granddad and I were married. And so she was crazy about him. She enjoyed getting to know him, and she was a delight, and I just enjoyed her so much. That house had a lot of history to it because it was in that part of the state where, in fact, I may be wrong, but I believe one of the first capitals of North Carolina was actually in New Bern, which was down close to Edenton. Um,
Okay.
so let's move now to my house in Wakeram. Um, my family had come over in for generations before I was born from Scotland, and a lot of my grandfathers and great grandfathers and greats were doctors, were medical doctors. And as you remember, girls, that was back in the old days, and they traveled a lot in horse and buggy to go around and see their patients. And they would go into the homes, obviously, to visit their patients. My grandfather Shaw died before I was born, so I never knew him, but I knew a lot about him because he was very important in the community. Other than a doctor, he was very philanthropic, and he also was on a lot of boards like hospital boards and school boards and all. And that's, I think, where my grandfather came in to do the same sort of thing. Um, my father was the only Shaw for I don't know how many generations that was not a medical doctor. But he went to Carolina and studied and then came back to do the farming business. And he had a cotton gin that he ran and a drugstore and his farming business. But my home in Wagram, where I grew up, was built by my grandfather and grandmother when they were married around 1900. This is a picture of the house. Matt Moeller painted that picture from the picture of the house. You see on the front porch, it had a big wraparound porch. It started on the left side and wrapped all around the front of the house, all around to the right side and to the sides. My sisters and I had an absolute fabulous time on that porch. On the left side, when we were growing up, we had our doll houses. We had our baby beds. We had little high chairs for the babies. We had their clothes. That was their little apartment, those little baby dolls. And we played and played and played and played there. As we got older, the dolls went away down there, and a ping pong table and other things came on that end. On the right side, there were lots of big rockers and other chairs and a swing that we loved to swing in. And also, as we got into high school, we had dances out there on the porch, and it was so much fun. A lot of people loved to come to our house because it was big and roomy, and they enjoyed it. The house itself was built with a lot of beautiful mantels in it, and it had a lot of marble pieces where the flooring of the mantels were put, and it
Uh-huh.
was just a very interesting house. It had a lot of woodwork, and it was a very pretty house. And I loved my neighborhood there and my growing up there. Also, we had a tremendous yard on the right and on the left. On the left, it was big enough to have like a little small softball field. And so when we had birthday parties, we had a lot of parties there so we could enjoy those yards. In the back of the house, there were a lot of freestanding structures. One was called the wash house. I can even remember as a little child in the wash house, it had lattice work on the windows all around. It was an outdoor structure, but it was, covered, of course. And inside was a huge, huge pot that the people that were helping my mother would put the clothes into wash and stir them around with a stick. And then when we got a real washing machine, it was put out there too. And of course, we had a place called the smokehouse, and that's where they would hang meats. When this was when my parents were, I mean, when my father and his family were living in there, they would hang their meats up in there and cure them. And then we had a big barn that had hay and things like that. Got lots of horses. People would ride horseback. It was a fun place to grow up. I love that house and that property.
Yep, I remember a lot of the stuff you're talking about too. That's fun to hear.
Yeah. Can you think of anything else about it, John, you would like me to tell?
Um, yeah, I mean, I remember the ping pong table, the smokehouse in the barn, and all the horses in the back. We used to like that. The big grape trellis. Used to have strong memories of pulling um the grapes off of there and eating those.
And a grapevine there that was always loved to go out and pick grapes. And that's where my cousin, I think I told you about my cousin Johnny that was visiting one summer, fell through the grapevine when he climbed on top and broke his arm and was in a cast. And for the rest of the time he was there, couldn't go swimming or do anything. He had his arm in a cast. But grapevines were all important back in those days too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In that house too, one thing about I loved, my mom was not a great cook, but and she had help in the kitchen a lot, but she was a great pickle maker, and she made the best cucumber pickle, watermelon rind pickle, and peach pickle. And I have the recipes of all those, and they were so involved and so much work and so hard. I've never done any of them, and I've tried to find some that were similar in stores, and I have a few times. But we had a long hall that went through the middle part of the house with bedrooms on both sides and bathroom. And then in the back, we had another long hall, and there was a kitchen and the dining room and another bedroom, and then a room that they eventually turned into the laundry room. But
Mhm.
it was a long house and a big house, and it was a lot of fun for us growing up in that house.
Yep, I definitely remember the watermelon rind pickles well.
I know it. Never had any quite like those. Can you think of anything else from it, John,
No,
from your
that's
memory?
awesome. Yeah,
Oh,
we
and
can always. Yeah,
one
go
thing
ahead.
that we had to do when I was growing up too, we had a big garden, and we used a lot out of that garden to cook with. And so oftentimes in the summer we would want to go to the river, is what we called it, and some people call it a swimming hole, but it was a river, and it was a pretty good sized river. And my mother would never let us go to the river to play and swim until we went to the garden and picked our share of vegetables for that day. Then she would take us to the river, and it had a strong current in the river. And sometimes we would walk down to the bridge and jump off and come down in the current and come down where we had swings set up and everything. But it was a big place for us all to enjoy being together. My growing up days were interesting and fun.
Hmm.
It was a good growing up time for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those stories.
We'll do this another time. It's fun for us.
Yeah, fun for me too.
Thank
Okay,
you, John.
bye-bye.
Bye.